Look down at your dog right now. Maybe they're curled up at your feet. Maybe they're staring at you with that look, the one that makes you feel like the most important person alive. You probably don't think twice about it. Of course your dog loves you. Of course you love them back. That's just how it works. But here's the thing. That bond you feel right now, that specific feeling of looking at an animal and seeing something almost like a person looking back, it didn't always exist. For most of human history, it was completely impossible. Dogs as we know them weren't companions. They were competitors. They were danger. They were noise outside the camp at night that meant something was wrong. And then, roughly 14,000 years ago, something shifted. Not gradually, not slowly over millions of years the way most evolutionary changes happen. Suddenly, in the archaeological record, there is a clear before and after. Before a certain point, you find wolf bones near human settlements the way you'd expect. Scattered, discarded, cracked open for marrow just like deer bones or bison bones. They were food. They were threat. They were nothing special. And then the burials start. Researchers digging through sites across Europe and the Middle East began finding something that stopped them cold. Dogs buried with humans, not thrown in a pit, not discarded, deliberately placed, carefully arranged. In some cases buried with a human hand resting on them. In one site in Israel, a woman was found buried with a puppy tucked against her chest, her hand positioned as if she had placed it there herself in the last moments before she died. That burial is 12,000 years old. Think about what that means. At a time when humans were struggling to survive, when every calorie mattered, when death was constant and resources were scarce, someone looked at a dog and decided it deserved to be mourned, deserved to be remembered, deserved to go wherever she was going. Scientists have been arguing about why for decades, and the answer they've landed on is stranger and more revealing than anyone expected. Because the story of why humans started burying dogs isn't really about dogs at all. It's about what was happening to us. Something was changing inside the human mind around that exact moment in history, and the dog burial is just the first clue. For most of human prehistory, wolves and humans were enemies. Not the distant, abstract kind of enemies, the immediate, daily, life or death kind. You're camped on an open plain with your family, the fire is low, and somewhere just beyond the edge of the light, you can hear them. That sound was one of the most dangerous sounds your ancestors could hear. It meant something was watching. It meant someone might not wake up in the morning. Wolves were not cute. They were not misunderstood. They were apex predators competing for the exact same prey humans were hunting. When a human tribe brought down a deer, wolves wanted it. When wolves found a carcass first, humans went hungry. For hundreds of thousands of years, that was the relationship. Two intelligent, social, highly organized predators occupying the same landscape and getting in each other's way, and humans responded the way humans always respond to threats. They killed them. Wolf bones found near early human settlements show the same cut marks as prey animals. Skinned, butchered, eaten. There was nothing sentimental about it. A wolf was a resource or a danger, and either way, you dealt with it the same way. So what changed? The leading theory starts not with wolves, but with garbage. As humans began forming more permanent settlements, they created something that had never existed before in nature. Reliable, concentrated waste. Bones, scraps, discarded food piling up at the edges of camps. And some wolves, the ones bold enough to get close, the ones calm enough not to bolt at the sight of a human, started eating it. This is where it gets interesting, because the wolves that could tolerate human proximity were not typical wolves. In any wolf population, there is natural variation in temperament. Most are skittish, aggressive, wired for maximum caution around anything unfamiliar, but a small number are different. Calmer, less reactive, more curious than afraid. Those wolves ate better. They survived more winters. They had more pups. And slowly, generation by generation, the wolves hanging around human camps started to look and behave differently from the wolves in the wild. Smaller, rounder faces, floppy ears in some cases, more expressive eyes. They were domesticating themselves. But here is what the garbage theory cannot explain. It can tell you how wolves got closer to humans. It cannot tell you why humans started caring about them. Tolerating an animal near your camp is one thing. Burying it with your own hands is something else entirely. Something had to happen inside the human mind to make that leap possible. And the timing of when it happened tells us exactly what that something was. The site is called Bonoberkassel. It's a small town in western Germany. In 1914, workers quarrying basalt. They accidentally broke open something sealed for 14,223 years. Inside was a double human grave. A man around 40 to 45 years old. A woman around 25. Tucked between them, the remains of a dog. That dog changed everything scientists thought about the human-animal relationship. Researchers analyzed the bones decades later using modern techniques. They found something nobody expected. The dog had been sick, severely sick, in the last weeks of its life. It suffered at least 2 serious bouts of canine distemper, a brutal viral disease. It causes seizures, paralysis, and neurological deterioration. In the wild, a wolf that sick would die, abandoned by the pack, unable to hunt or keep up. This dog survived those episodes, which means someone kept it alive. Someone fed it when it couldn't feed itself. Someone stayed with it through seizures. Someone made a decision, consciously and repeatedly, to spend resources on an animal with no practical value anymore. When it died, they placed it in the grave, with their own dead, sealed it under rock. This is not behavior of people who saw dogs as tools. This is grief. Bon-Oberkassel is not an isolated case. Similar burials found across a large range. A site in Israel called Ein Malaha, 12,000 years old, contains an elderly human buried with a puppy. A site in Illinois around 8,500 years ago shows dogs buried in a dedicated cemetery, separate from humans, with the same care as human graves. Sites in Siberia, China, Americas, every continent where humans spread. Dog burials followed, not after thousands of years, almost immediately. The timing is the key. 14,000 to 15,000 years ago, at the edge of a dramatic transition, the end of the last ice age, glaciers retreating, landscapes transforming, megafauna humans hunted for hundreds of thousands of years, mammoths, giant ground sloths, woolly rhinoceros, colliding into extinction one by one. The world humans had known was ending. Scientists studying this period noticed something consistent across multiple sites and cultures. As ice retreated, old certainties disappeared. Human social behavior shifted. Communities became more complex. Trade networks extended further. Rituals around death became more elaborate. Humans built new frameworks. For understanding the world and their place, the dog stepped into that moment, not as a tool, not as a food source, as something new, something never before in the human world, a non-human that chose to be near you, that watched your face for information, that came back even when it didn't have to. For humans navigating collapse of everything familiar, that might have meant more than we can fully measure. Think about everything your ancestors valued enough to bury, tools they had spent weeks crafting, weapons that had kept them alive, ochre, beads, objects that carried meaning. We can only guess at now. Burial was not casual. In a world where survival consumed nearly every waking hour, the act of digging a grave and placing something carefully was a statement. It meant this mattered. It meant this was real. And they did it for dogs, not for horses, which they also lived near, not for the oxen they would later domesticate for labor, not for any of the dozens of other animals. The first animal humans ever mourned was the dog, and that fact sits at the center of something much larger than animal domestication. What the burials tell us is that somewhere around 14,000 years ago, a human being looked at another species and recognized something. Not usefulness, not resource value, something harder to name, a quality of attention, a kind of presence. The dog was watching them the way nothing wild had ever watched them before, not sizing them up as a threat or as prey, just watching, interested. There. Evolutionary biologists have spent years studying what makes dogs different from every other domesticated animal, and the answer keeps coming back to the same thing. Dogs read human faces, not in a vague general way, with a specificity and sensitivity that even our closest primate relatives don't match. A dog can follow a human gaze, can interpret a pointing finger, can read frustration, warmth, grief in a human expression, and respond to it. No other animal on Earth does this the way dogs do. And here is the part that still quietly astonishes researchers. Dogs developed this ability not over millions of years of separate evolution. They developed it during domestication, during the time they spent living next to us. They learned to read us because we were worth reading, because paying attention to humans turned out to be the most successful survival strategy, the most successful survival strategy in the history of their species. They shaped themselves around us. And somewhere in that process, without a word being spoken, without any conscious agreement on either side, something that had never existed before came into being. A relationship between two species built not on fear, not on utility, but on something that looks uncomfortably like affection. Every dog alive today is a descendant of the wolves that made that choice. And every person who has ever loved a dog is a descendant of the humans who noticed, who fed a sick animal through the winter, who placed a hand on a small body in a grave and did not want to let go. You didn't choose to love your dog, you were built for it. 14,000 years in the making, on both sides.